The massive crystal halls of Nexus Prime sparkled with cold light as beings from 12 different worlds gathered for the emergency session. Ji-Wan walked slowly down the center aisle, her human delegation following close behind. The sound of their boots echoed strangely in the vast chamber, mixing with the clicks, hisses, and growls of alien languages. Taemin kept his hand near his sidearm, though he knew it would be useless here. His military training made him count exits and watch for threats, but the real danger in this room came from words, not weapons. Behind him, Salmon carried a data pad filled with Earth's latest research on the Devourer threat. She had spent months preparing reports that might save millions of lives across the galaxy. The council chamber stretched up toward a dome of pure crystal that showed the stars beyond. 12 curved platforms held the representatives of the most powerful species in known space. At the highest platform sat High Chancellor Veloz of the Zenthrans, his purple skin gleaming under the lights. His 4 arms moved in slow, deliberate gestures as he spoke with other council members. Ji-Wan took her place at the small platform reserved for humanity. It sat lower than all the others, a reminder that humans were the newest members of this galactic community. 3 years had passed since first contact, and Earth still felt like the awkward child at a table full of adults. Veloz raised one of his arms, and the chamber fell silent. His voice boomed through translation devices, reaching every being present. "We gather today to address the growing crisis," he began. "The Devourers have consumed another star system. The Kef homeworld of Trilaxis is gone. 17 billion souls lost to those mechanical monsters." A wave of clicking sounds came from the Kef delegation platform. Their insect-like bodies trembled with grief and rage. Ji-Wan felt her heart sink. She had visited Trilaxis once during a cultural exchange. It had been a beautiful world of silver cities and singing crystals. "The time for half measures has ended," Veloz continued. "We must commit fully to this war, or we will all share the fate of Trilaxis." Kextar, the representative of the Mercantile Union, stepped forward on his platform. His slug-like body glistened as he spoke through his breathing apparatus. "The Union has already sacrificed 60% of our labor force to the war effort," he said in his wet, bubbling voice. "Our trade routes are defended by skeleton crews. Our worlds produce nothing but weapons and war supplies." Other voices joined in, each species listing their contributions and losses. The hegemony had converted entire planets into military factories. The collective had merged their greatest minds into a single war-planning intelligence. The Federation had banned reproduction to focus all resources on the fight. Ji-Wan listened to each report with growing unease. These were not the voices of allies working together. They sounded like creditors demanding payment from a debtor. Taemin leaned close to her ear. "They're building up to something," he whispered. "This feels like a setup." Salmon nodded agreement, her fingers moving nervously over her data pad. She had been analyzing the tactical reports shared by other species, and something felt wrong about them. Critical information seemed to be missing from every briefing. Veloz gestured toward the human platform with 2 of his arms. "Which brings us to our newest members," he said. "Humanity has been part of our galactic community for 3 years. You have shared in our protection and traded with our merchants. You have learned our technologies and visited our worlds." Ji-Wan stood up straight, feeling the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon her. "We are grateful for the friendship shown to us," she replied. "Earth stands ready to do its part in defending our shared civilization." "Good," Veloz said, though his tone carried no warmth. "Because the Council has decided what that part must be." A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing star charts and population figures. Earth's solar system glowed in blue, along with the 17 colony worlds that humanity had established in recent years. The human Population currently stands at 32 billion across all settled worlds, Kextar announced. Your reproduction rate remains the highest among council species. Your military age population exceeds 4 billion individuals. Jiwan felt ice forming in her stomach. The way they spoke about human lives sounded like someone counting livestock. The Council has determined that humanity will contribute 70% of its total population to immediate military service, Valos declared. 22 billion humans will be deployed to frontline combat zones within 6 months. The chamber erupted in alien sounds that the translators rendered as agreement and approval. Jiwan stared at the holographic numbers, unable to process what she was hearing. Taemin's hand moved to his weapon before he caught himself. They want us to sacrifice 22 billion people? He hissed. Furthermore, Kextar continued, the remaining human worlds will be converted to resource extraction and manufacturing centers. Your advanced agricultural techniques will feed our armies. Your mining operations will supply our factories. Soman stood up suddenly, her face pale. You're asking us to destroy our entire civilization, she said, her voice shaking. Those aren't military contributions. That's genocide with extra steps. Valos fixed his 4 eyes on her with cold amusement. The survival of galactic civilization requires sacrifice from all members. Every species has given up their previous way of life for the greater good. But not their existence, Jiwan said quietly. You're asking us to cease being human. You will remain human, another council member replied. You will simply be useful humans instead of selfish ones. The casual cruelty of those words hit Jiwan like a physical blow. She looked around the chamber and saw the truth written in every alien face. They had never seen humanity as equals. Earth had been invited to join this galactic community not as partners, but as a resource to be exploited when the time came. Taemin stepped closer to Jiwan's side. His trained eye caught something the others might have missed. Several species had stopped translating their side conversations, but their body language spoke clearly enough. They were not discussing the proposal. They were dividing up what remained after humanity's sacrifice. We request time to consult with our government, Jiwan said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Valos waved one arm dismissively. Of course. You have 48 hours to prepare your people for deployment. The first transport ships will arrive at Earth in 3 days. And if we refuse? Soman asked. The chamber fell completely silent. Valos leaned forward on his platform, his purple skin darkening with what humans had learned to recognize as Zenthran, anger. The Devourers care nothing for galactic politics, he said slowly. If humanity chooses to stand alone against them, you will face the same fate as Trilaxis. Though I suspect you would not last nearly as long, Kextar's wet breathing filled the silence. The choice is simple, he added. Die serving the galaxy, or die serving no one. Jiwan gathered her delegation with a gesture. They walked toward the exit in complete silence, feeling the weight of alien stares on their backs. Not one voice called out in support or sympathy. Not one species suggested a different solution. As they reached the chamber doors, Taemin glanced back at the assembled council. What he saw there made his soldiers' instincts scream warnings. These beings were not discussing how to save humanity from the Devourers. They were discussing how to divide up human worlds after the population was gone. The doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder, sealing humanity's fate one way or another. Outside in the crystal corridors of Nexus Prime, Jiwan finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands shook as she realized the truth that the council had tried to hide behind diplomatic language. They had not invited humanity to join galactic civilization. They had fattened Earth up for slaughter. The emergency session room deep inside the United Earth headquarters buzzed with quiet tension. President Hyunwoo sat at the head of the long table, his face showing no emotion as he listened to Jiwan's report. Around the table, The most powerful people on Earth waited in silence. Defense Minister Yuna took notes on a tablet, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. Every few seconds, she would pause and shake her head slightly, as if she could not believe what she was hearing. Fleet Admiral Do Hyun sat perfectly still, his old soldier's discipline keeping his face blank, even as his mind raced through terrible calculations. Ji-won finished her report and placed a data crystal on the table. The recording of the council session would be studied by analysts for weeks to come, but everyone in this room already understood the basic truth. The galactic community wanted to use humanity as cannon fodder in their war. 22 billion people, Hyunwoo said quietly. They want us to send 22 billion of our citizens to die in their war. Taemin stood up from his chair. It's worse than that, sir. They're not planning for any of our people to come back. I watched their faces during that meeting. They were already discussing how to split up our worlds after we're gone. Salman opened her laptop and connected it to the room's main screen. Data flowed across the display in streams of numbers and charts. I've been analyzing the tactical information they've shared with us about the Devourers, she said. There are huge gaps in their reports. They're not telling us how these machines actually fight. Yuna looked up from her tablet. What kind of gaps? Basic things, Soman replied, highlighting sections of data on the screen. Devourer response times to different weapons, their adaptation patterns, weak points in their armor. It's like they want our soldiers to go in blind. Admiral Do-hyun spoke for the first time since the meeting began. How many ships does the Council think we have? Ji-won checked her notes. They've been told we have 800 combat vessels across all our fleets. Do-hyun almost smiled. We have 3,216 ships capable of combat operations, plus another 800 in various stages of construction. The room fell silent. President Hyunwoo leaned forward in his chair. How is that possible? We've shared all our military information with the Council. No, sir, Do-hyun said calmly. We've shared what the Council asked for. They asked about our dedicated warships. They never asked about converted cargo vessels, mining ships with military-grade shields, or colony ships with hidden weapon systems. Soman pulled up another set of data. It's the same with our technology. They know about our basic quantum drives, but not about the new fold space engines. They know we have artificial intelligence, but not how advanced our AI systems have become. Yuna set down her tablet and looked around the table. They think we're primitive newcomers who got lucky with a few good inventions. While we've been watching and learning from every species in their council, Taemin added. We know their languages, their cultures, their military capabilities. They know almost nothing about us. President Hyunwoo stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city below. Millions of people went about their daily lives, unaware that their entire species had just been marked for extinction by their supposed allies. What are our options? He asked without turning around. Yuna spoke first. We could comply with their demands, send our people to fight their war and hope some survive. That's not an option, Admiral Do-hyun said firmly. Based on what they're not telling us about the Devourers, they're sending our people to certain death. This isn't military service, it's murder. Salman pulled up star charts showing human settlements across known space. We could fight the Council directly. Our technology is more advanced than they realize. And become the enemy of 12 species at once? Taemin shook his head. Even with our hidden advantages, those aren't good odds. Hyunwoo turned back to face the room. There's a third option. He walked back to the table and touched the data crystal that contained the recording of the council session. They've made it clear that they don't see us as equals or allies. They see us as a resource to be consumed. So we remove the resource from their reach, Admiral Do-hyun said quietly. Yuna looked confused. What do you mean? Do-hyun activated his personal communicator and entered a long code sequence. Operation Silent Departure. It's a contingency plan we developed after our first year in the galactic community. You planned for this? Jiwan asked. We planned for the possibility that our new friends might not be as friendly as they seemed, Do-hyun replied. Every human settlement, every ship, every installation has evacuation protocols ready to activate. We can have our entire civilization moved within 6 months. Soman stared at the star charts on her screen. Moved where? Do-hyun smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Beyond the Council's reach, beyond the galactic rim where their maps end. We've been secretly surveying systems out there for 2 years. President Hyunwoo sat back down and looked at each person around the table. Are we seriously considering abandoning our place in galactic civilization? What place? Taemin asked. They've made it clear we never had a real place. We were just being fattened up for slaughter. Yuna pulled up economic data on her tablet. If we leave, their entire infrastructure will collapse. We provide 30% of their food production through our agricultural worlds. Our shipping companies handle 60% of intersystem cargo transport. Our communication networks carry 40% of their long-range messages, Soman added. Our technical support teams maintain systems on hundreds of council worlds. Admiral Do-hyun nodded. They've become dependent on us without realizing it. They think we need them to survive. But the truth is exactly the opposite. President Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment, staring at the data crystal on the table. The recording inside contained the voices of beings who had casually discussed the death of 22 billion humans as if they were talking about the weather. How long would it take to implement Operation Silent Departure? He asked. 6 months. For complete evacuation, Do-hyun replied. But we could begin immediate withdrawal of essential personnel and resources, make it look like normal military repositioning for the war effort. And when they realize what we're doing, by then it will be too late to stop us, Do-hyun said. But there's something else, sir, something that will make sure they can never force us to come back. He activated another set of files on the main screen. Every piece of technology we've given them, every system we've built on their worlds, every bit of infrastructure we've installed has what we call maintenance protocols. Soman understood immediately. Hidden shutdown codes. More than that, Do-hyun said. Selective system failures that will cascade through their networks. When we leave, we take our knowledge with us, and we make sure they can't use what we've already given them. Yuna shook her head in amazement. You've been planning to sabotage the entire galactic infrastructure. We've been planning to recover our intellectual property if our partnership ended badly, Do-hyun corrected. The Council will learn the difference between cooperation and dependence. President Hyunwoo stood up again and walked around the table. They wanted servants, he said quietly. They wanted us to throw away our lives and our civilization for their benefit. He stopped behind Jiwan's chair and placed a hand on her shoulder. What they'll get instead is a lesson in the value of treating others with respect. Hyunwoo returned to his seat and looked directly at Admiral Do-hyun. Execute Operation Silent Departure. Begin immediate withdrawal of all human assets from Council. Space. Do-hyun activated his communicator and spoke a single code phrase. The garden is closed. Across the galaxy, on every human ship and station and world, receivers picked up the coded signal. Phase 1 of humanity's greatest exodus had begun. In the quiet emergency session room, the leaders of Earth sat in silence as they realized what they had just done. They had chosen dignity over survival, independence over security. They had chosen to walk away from their place at the galactic table rather than become the meal. Captain Minho stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Seoul, watching the massive cargo pods being loaded into his vessel's holds. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. Following evacuation procedures they had drilled hundreds of times but never expected to use. Through the main viewport, he could see the surface of Kepler 442b stretching out below. The human colony there had grown into a thriving city of 2 million people in just 18 months. Beautiful gardens surrounded gleaming towers, and the colonists had turned the red desert into green farmland that fed 3 other worlds. Now, they were abandoning it all. Loading Bay 7 reports full capacity, his navigation officer Yunji announced. That's the last of the essential personnel from the surface. Minho nodded and activated his communication system. Ground control, this is New Seoul. We're ready. For departure once the remaining transports dock. The voice that answered belonged to the Zenthran overseer assigned to monitor human activities on Kepler 442b. Like most council species, the Zenthrans barely paid attention to what humans did. As long as quotas were met. New Seoul, this is Overseer Krelvos. Explain the sudden increase in transport activity. Our sensors show massive movement of personnel and equipment. Minho had prepared for this question. We're repositioning our agricultural specialists and equipment for the war effort, Overseer. The Council's new military requirements need immediate implementation. There was a pause as the Zenthran processed this information. Very well. Ensure that food production continues without interruption. Of course, Overseer, Minho replied, cutting the connection. He turned to his tactical officer. How long until the last transport arrives? 12 minutes, Captain. On the surface below, the evacuation continued with mechanical precision. Humans loaded essential equipment and personal belongings onto shuttles while leaving behind anything that might seem suspicious to watching alien eyes. To any observer, it looked like a military repositioning, not a permanent abandonment. But Minho knew the truth. In 6 hours after his ship jumped to hyperspace, hidden systems throughout the colony would activate. The atmospheric processors would shut down. The water purification plants would stop working. The power grid would fail in carefully planned cascades that would look like natural breakdowns. Within a month, Kepler 442b would be uninhabitable again. 3 systems away, Gina stood in the control center of the Mars terraforming project, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. Around her, technicians monitored the massive atmospheric processors that had been slowly transforming the red planet for the past decade. The hegemony had invested heavily in the Mars project, providing raw materials and energy in exchange for human expertise. They planned to use the completed world as a military staging area for attacks on Devourer-controlled systems. Cascade Protocol is ready for implementation, reported her assistant Bayam. All safeguards are in place. Gina nodded and placed her palm on the authorization scanner. Execute Cascade Protocol. Authorization Gina 77 Alpha. Deep beneath Mars's surface, carefully hidden subroutines began their work. The terraforming computers started making tiny adjustments to atmospheric composition and pressure regulation. To any observer, the changes would look like normal fluctuations in a complex system. But Gina knew that within 3 months, the delicate balance that kept Mars habitable would collapse. The atmosphere would thin beyond the ability to sustain human life. The temperature would drop below survivable levels. The planet would return to its natural state, taking with it billions of credits in hegemony investment. Upload complete, Biam announced. All human personnel have been evacuated from the surface installations. Gina gathered her personal belongings and headed for the transport that would take her to the orbital station. From there, she would board a refugee ship bound for the Galactic Rim, carrying the hopes of 2 billion Martian colonists in her encrypted data files. High above Luna, systems engineer Kyung floated through the zero-gravity corridors of Orbital Shipyard 7. The massive facility stretched for hundreds of kilometers in all directions, its construction bays filled with half-finished vessels for a dozen different species. The Mercantile Union had commissioned 40 cargo haulers from the human yards, attracted by their advanced efficiency and low construction costs. The Federation had ordered 15 exploration vessels with human navigation systems. Even the proud collective had swallowed their arrogance enough to request human-built communication arrays for their fleet. All of those ships were about to become very expensive scrap metal, Package delivery complete, reported his assistant Sue from her workstation. All commissioned vessels have received their final software updates. Kyung smiled grimly as he checked the status boards. The software updates were actually sophisticated viruses designed to lie dormant until activated by a specific signal. When that signal came, every ship built in human yards would suffer catastrophic system failures. Navigation computers would forget how to calculate hyperspace jumps. Life support systems would develop mysterious glitches. Weapon systems would fail to respond to targeting commands. Communication arrays would broadcast nothing but static. How many ships are we talking about? Sue asked quietly. Kyung consulted his files. 637 completed vessels across all yards. Another 200 in various stages of construction. The council species are going to be very unhappy when they discover this. They should have thought about that before they decided to treat us like cattle, Kyung replied. He activated his personal communicator and sent a coded message to Admiral Do-hyun back on Earth. The orbital facilities were ready for evacuation. In 48 hours, the last human workers would board transport ships and disappear into the vast emptiness between stars. Back on Nexus Prime, Ji-won sat in her temporary quarters, composing humanity's final message to the Galactic Council. She had spent hours crafting the words, trying to find the right balance between dignity and defiance. Taemin paced near the window, his soldiers' instincts troubled by their exposed position in the heart of council space. "Are you sure we should wait until the last moment to deliver this?" "We need to give our people time to get clear," Ji-won replied. "If we reveal our intentions too early, they might try to stop the evacuation by force." Salman looked up from her datapad, where she had been monitoring human activities across the galaxy. "Latest reports show 80% of our people are already in transit. The remaining 20% will be mobile within 6 hours. Ji-won nodded and returned to her message. The words needed to be perfect, because they would be humanity's final statement to the beings who had tried to destroy them. "We came to you, seeking partnership and found only exploitation," she wrote. "We offered friendship and received only demands for sacrifice. Since you view us as expendable, we shall make ourselves absent." She paused, considering her next words carefully. The council needed to understand that this was not an emotional decision made in anger. It was a calculated response to their betrayal. "You have taught us that power without wisdom leads only to destruction. You chose to be our masters rather than our friends. Now live with that choice, as we have learned to live without you." Taemin stopped pacing and looked over her shoulder. "That's going to make them very angry." "Good," Ji-won replied. "They should be angry. They should understand what they've lost through their own arrogance." Soman's datapad chimed with an incoming message. She read it quickly and smiled. "Admiral Do-hyun reports that the last civilian transports have cleared council space. We're clear to deliver the message." Ji-won saved her work and stood up. The time for diplomacy had ended. The time for truth had arrived. She walked to the communication console and opened a channel to the council chamber. Within minutes, her words would reach every species in the galactic community, carried by the same human-built networks that would soon fall silent forever. "This is Ambassador Ji-won of Earth, delivering humanity's final statement to the Galactic Council." She began to read, her voice steady and clear. With each word, she was closing the door on one chapter of human history and opening another. Somewhere in the vast darkness beyond the galactic rim, refugee ships full of human civilians waited for word that their long journey to freedom could finally begin. High Chancellor Valos stood in the council chamber, his purple skin pale with stress as he read the latest reports from across Zenthran space. His 4 arms trembled slightly as he set down the datapads, each one containing news worse than the last. The atmospheric processors on 7 Zenthran worlds had failed simultaneously. Food production had dropped by 60% across the Empire. 3 major trade routes had become unusable when their navigation beacons stopped working. Most terrifying of all, the war against the Devourers was going very badly without human support. "How many systems have we lost in the past month?" he asked his aide. 12, High Chancellor. "The Devourers are advancing faster than ever before." Volos closed his eyes and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 6 months ago, the Council had been confident in their victory. They had finally found a way to make the troublesome humans useful by sending them to die in the front lines while the superior species preserved themselves for the future. Now the humans were gone, and the galaxy was falling apart. Across the chamber, Kextar of the Mercantile Union was having his own crisis. His slug-like body glistened with stress chemicals as he reviewed trade reports that made no sense. Half of his merchant fleet was stranded in space with broken navigation systems. The other half was trapped in dock because their cargo handling equipment had mysteriously failed. "The economic damage is beyond calculation," his financial advisor reported through the breathing apparatus they both required. "Our trade income has dropped by 70%. Repair costs are consuming our entire military budget." Kextar's eye stalks twisted in frustration. "How did the humans do this? Our best technicians cannot figure out what is wrong with these systems." "They appear to be designed failures, sir. Someone programmed them to break down in very specific ways that are almost impossible to fix." The truth was slowly becoming clear to all the Council species. They had not been partnering with a primitive newcomer species. They had been dependent on a civilization far more advanced than they had realized. And now that civilization had taken its knowledge and disappeared into the void. In a hidden observation post on the edge of Council space, Seogen monitored the emergency communications between the various species. His stealth ship was invisible to their sensors, using technology that the humans had never shared with their supposed allies. The intercepted messages painted a picture of complete collapse. The Federation was rationing food because their agricultural worlds were failing without human farming techniques. The collective's communication network had broken down when human-maintained relay stations went offline. The hegemony was facing rebellions on a dozen worlds because their transportation system could no longer move troops and supplies efficiently. But the most disturbing messages came from the war front. "Devourer advance continues unopposed through the Kepler sector," read one military report. "Our forces lack the tactical flexibility that human units provided. Estimated time until enemy reaches our core systems, 4 months." Seogen transmitted this intelligence back to the hidden human fleets beyond the galactic rim. Admiral Do Hyun needed to know how quickly the Council's military situation was deteriorating. Another message caught his attention. This one came from a Zenthran general whose forces had just been destroyed by the Devourers. "The mechanical forces adapt to our weapons within hours of first contact. We need the human tactical systems that could predict and counter their adaptation patterns. Without human support, we cannot win this war." Seogen almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Then he remembered the recording of the Council session where they had casually discussed the deaths of 22 billion humans. On the bridge of the stealth ship Ghost of Earth, Commander Da-Yoon read the intelligence reports from across Council space with grim satisfaction. The various species were not just failing to fight the Devourers effectively, they were starting to fight each other. "Latest intercepts show the Federation blaming the Union for humanity's departure," her communications officer reported. "They claim the Union's trade demands drove the humans away." "And what does the Union say?" Da-Yoon asked. "They blame the Zenthrans for being too aggressive in the Council session. They say Valos scared the humans into running." Da-Yoon nodded. This was exactly what human intelligence had predicted. When faced with a crisis, the Council species would turn on each other instead of working together. Their alliance had always been based on mutual fear and greed, not genuine cooperation. "Any signs that they're trying to track our people?" 3 hegemony search fleets have been sent toward the galactic rim," her tactical officer replied. But they're using outdated star charts. They're looking in systems we surveyed and rejected 2 years ago. The humans had been very careful to hide their true destination. The new worlds they had chosen lay beyond the edge of known space, in star. Systems that the Council's maps marked as empty or uninhabitable. It would take the Council decades to search all the possible locations, assuming they survived their current crisis. Back in the Council chamber on Nexus Prime, an emergency session was underway. Representatives from all the remaining species had gathered to discuss their desperate situation. The chamber felt much emptier than before, with 3 species having already withdrawn from the Council to focus on defending their own worlds. Veloz struggled to maintain order as the various delegates shouted accusations at each other in a dozen different languages. "The humans must be found and brought back," declared the Kef representative, his insect-like mandibles clicking with agitation. "Our survival depends on their technology." "They made their choice when they abandoned us," replied the Federation delegate. "We should focus on replacing their capabilities with our own people." Kextar's wet breathing filled the chamber as he spoke. "Our own people cannot replace what the humans provided. Their agricultural techniques, their navigation systems, their manufacturing processes. We never fully understood how they worked. Then we learn," Veloz declared. "We capture human technology and reverse engineer it." An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Everyone present knew the truth that no one wanted to say out loud. The human technology they had access to was breaking down faster than they could study it. And the humans had been very careful to take all their advanced knowledge with them. "What about the war?" asked a small voice from the corner. The speaker was a young collective delegate, one of the few survivors of their species' disastrous attempt to merge minds for military planning. Veloz looked at the tactical display showing devourer advances across the galaxy. Red markers indicated lost systems, and there were far too many of them. "We fight with what we have," he said finally. "We adapt to survive without human assistance." "And if we cannot adapt quickly enough?" the collective delegate pressed. No one answered that question. They all knew the answer, but none of them were willing to say it out loud. In his hidden observation post, Seojun recorded every word of the council session. This intelligence would be valuable for the human leadership as they planned their people's future in exile. As the session ended and the delegates returned to their ships, Seojun noticed something that made him smile grimly. Several of the departing vessels showed signs of mechanical stress that their crews probably did not understand. Hairline cracks in hull plating, subtle irregularities in engine emissions, computer systems running just a little bit slower than they should. The human-built components in those ships were breaking down on schedule, just as the engineers had planned. Within a few more months, the Council species would find travel between their worlds difficult and dangerous. They had wanted to use humanity as expendable soldiers in their war. Instead, they had made themselves dependent on human knowledge and industry. Now they would learn the true cost of their arrogance as their civilization crumbled around them. The Devourers were still advancing. The Council was still arguing. And, somewhere beyond the rim of known space, humanity was building something new and better than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Exodus was complete. The reckoning had begun. 2 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, and High Chancellor Veloz looked nothing like the proud leader who had once demanded their sacrifice. His purple skin had faded to gray, marked with scars from the collapse of his own palace when the human-built support systems failed. 3 of his 4 arms hung useless at his sides, damaged in the riots that had torn through Zenthran space when food shortages reached critical levels. He stood alone in what remained of the council chamber on Nexus Prime. The beautiful crystal dome above was cracked and dark, its maintenance systems long since broken beyond repair. Only 4 species remained in the council now. The others had either been consumed by the Devourers or had withdrawn to defend their dying worlds in isolation. Volos activated the emergency broadcast system, one of the few pieces of technology that still worked reliably. His message would go out across the galaxy, carried by old communication networks that predated human involvement. "This is High Chancellor Valos of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice hoarse with desperation. "I am addressing this message to humanity, wherever you may be in the void between stars." He paused, struggling with words he had never imagined he would need to say. "We were wrong. We made a terrible mistake 2 years ago when we demanded your sacrifice. We understand now that we were not asking for military service. We were asking for the destruction of your entire civilization." The chamber's ancient recording systems captured every word, every pause, every tremor in his voice. "The Devourers now control 60% of our galaxy. Our worlds are dying without your knowledge to sustain them. Our people are starving without your agricultural systems. Our fleets cannot fight effectively without your tactical innovations." Valos looked directly into the recording device, his 4 eyes filled with the weight of his species approaching extinction. "We beg you to return. We will give you anything you ask: full council membership with equal voting rights, territorial guarantees for your worlds, complete autonomy over your military forces. Please, humanity, help us survive." Far beyond the galactic rim, in a star system that no council map had ever recorded, Jiwan sat in her office on the world they had named New Haven. Through her window, she could see the lights of a thriving city built by human hands and alien allies who had learned the value of genuine cooperation. The planet was beautiful in a way that no council world had ever been. Clean rivers ran through valleys filled with crops that fed dozens of species in harmony. Cities rose from the landscape like natural growths, their architecture blending human design with the artistic traditions of their new friends. Tae-hyung, now serving as Minister of Defense for the Independent Terran Coalition, brought her the latest reports from their intelligence networks still operating in council space. "Valos has been broadcasting that message every day for 3 weeks, he said, setting down a data pad on her desk. "The other surviving council members have sent similar pleas." Jiwan picked up the pad and scrolled through the desperate messages. Each one was more pathetic than the last, filled with promises and pleas that might have seemed generous if they had come 3 years earlier. "Any response from our people?" she asked. "The settlement councils have been unanimous," Tae-hyung replied. "Nobody wants to go back. They remember what the council tried to do to us." Through another door came Naeon, who now served as Minister of Foreign Affairs for their new coalition. She carried reports from their diplomatic missions to other species living beyond the galactic rim. "The Cathara delegation has agreed to our mutual defense pact," she announced with a smile. "That makes 7 species in our alliance now." Jiwan nodded with satisfaction. The Cathara were refugees like humanity, driven from their original worlds by council arrogance decades ago. They had survived in exile by developing remarkable biotechnology that complemented human engineering perfectly. "What about the nomad fleets?" "3 more clans have joined us," Naeon replied. "They're sharing their deep space navigation techniques in exchange for our medical technology." The Independent Terran Coalition had grown far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. Starting with 18 human colony worlds, it now encompassed 47 systems inhabited by 12 different species. Unlike the Council's hierarchy based on fear and exploitation, their alliance was built on genuine mutual benefit and respect. In the laboratory complex on New Haven's northern continent, Minji worked with a team of researchers from 6 different species to solve problems that the Council had never even tried to address. Her current project involved developing new defensive technologies to protect against devourer incursions, but not for the Council's benefit. The quantum resonance barriers are showing 96% effectiveness against devourer scout units. reported her Kithara colleague through the translation device they all wore. Minji smiled as she reviewed the test results. That's better than anything the Council ever developed. Their military doctrine was based on throwing lives at the problem until it went away. Her human assistant Wu Jin looked up from his calculations. Should we share this technology with the Council species? It might help them survive long enough to rebuild their civilizations. Minji considered the question carefully. The new humanity that had emerged in exile was not cruel or vindictive. They took no joy in the suffering of others, even those who had tried to destroy them. But they were also not naive enough to repeat old mistakes. The Council made their choice when they decided we were expendable, she said finally. They can make their own solutions with their own knowledge. Back on New Haven, Jiwon sat down at her desk to compose humanity's final response to the Council's desperate pleas. The message had been requested by the Coalition Council, which included representatives from all their allied species. Even their new friends wanted to hear what humanity would say to those who had tried to destroy them. She began typing, choosing her words carefully. High Chancellor Valos, we have received your messages and the similar pleas from other council members. We appreciate your admission that demanding our sacrifice was wrong. However, words spoken in desperation carry less weight than actions taken from a position of strength. She paused to look out her window again, where human children played alongside, young Kithara in parks that had never known war or exploitation. 2 years ago, you saw our willingness to cooperate as weakness to be exploited. You saw our desire for friendship as naivety to be taken advantage of. You saw our entire civilization as a resource to be consumed in your war. The truth needed to be stated clearly, without anger but also without compromise. You have taught us valuable lessons about the nature of power and the importance of choosing our allies carefully. We have learned that survival sometimes requires walking away from those who do not value your existence. Jiwon stood up and walked to her window, looking out at a world where different species worked together because they wanted to, not because they were forced to by fear or desperation. The Independent Terran Coalition wishes you success in your efforts to survive the crisis you have created. We hope you will learn from your mistakes and build something better from the ruins of your old civilization. She returned to her desk and typed the final paragraph. However, we will not be returning to help you. We have found something better than the galaxy you offered us. We have built a future based on mutual respect and genuine cooperation. We have learned to live without you, and we intend to continue doing so. Jiwon saved the message and scheduled it for broadcast back to Council space. It would be carried by automated relay stations that would ensure every surviving Council world received it. Outside her window, the sun set over New Haven's skyline, painting the sky in colors that reminded her of Earth, but somehow seemed more beautiful. This world had been built by people who chose to be here, who worked together because they believed in something better than mere survival. The Council had wanted servants and found exiles instead. In their arrogance, they had destroyed themselves more thoroughly than any external enemy ever could. And in the vast darkness beyond their dying galaxy, humanity had planted the seeds of something that would outlast every empire that had ever tried to use them.